Good morning, Mr. Maleka.
Good morning, Chair.
Everybody.
Good morning.
Thank you.
Chair, today we are going to briefly present the evidence of Dr. Ramuncha. Fortunately, we're not going to work with huge bundles of documentation.
Yes.
He has submitted a statement which is Exhibit U3. Chair, you'll find it in file 2, which was part and parcel of the bundles that were presented when Mr. Mabuza started his evidence.
Oh, yeah.
I have been assured by your registrar that it has been marked at the back with the name of Dr. Ramuncha.
Well, it is marked, but it is marked on the spine.
Yes, and the last statement in the doc, in the
But
file.
when you look for the statement itself and you look at the index, you look for affidavit by Dr. Ramuncha in vain. You see at the top something that says affidavit of Snehal Naga,
And
and
next
then
one.
a lot of annexures that are marked, but nothing tells you there. One of those is a statement by Dr. Ramuncha, so I had to look and look and look, and then ultimately I stumbled upon it.
I'm sorry, but Chair, you remember when we explained to you right from the beginning that U2 has separate statements,
Yes.
beginning with the statement of Mr. Mabuza,
Yes.
and thereafter you'd go to the statement of Mr. Naga, and the third one, which is U3, it's the statement of Tibedi Ramuncha.
Yes, but I think what should happen is the index should indicate the names of statements. For example, just like, or affidavits, just like Mr. Naga's one, because if all I'm looking at is this file, this Livage file, so I see in the spine there is the name of Snehal Naga and Ramuncha, so it means their statements are in here.
Yes.
So then I page through, and then I see there's an index.
Yes.
Then I want to see on what page I will find Dr. Ramuncha's affidavit or statement.
Yes.
I look at the index, I see there is, the index tells me about Mr. Naga's affidavit, and it tells me where to find it. And then for the rest, it says it's annexures.
Yes.
So I don't get to know that one of the annexures is Dr. Ramuncha's one. I think the index is the one that needs to be amended or corrected, or
Yes.
unless, or otherwise on the spine, something must say annexure so and so.
Yes.
Then I will know and look for that annexure and then find the statement. But I did find it. It didn't take too long.
Yes.
But I hoped I didn't have to spend a few minutes looking for.
Well, it seems as
where
if
to
the
find it.
public lecture has failed. There is a need for a private lecture
Yeah,
for
maybe.
the
Yeah,
administration responsible for
yeah,
arranging the documentation. We have tried.
Yes.
Regretfully, we have failed.
yeah. I think what may have to happen is either maybe apart from a member of the legal team, maybe the people or the leader of the people who do this part of the job needs to be present when maybe I explain exactly how I would like things to happen. But I would have thought that it should be easy, but it doesn't prove to be easy.
Yes.
Yeah.
We
all right.
suggest that a private discussion would help, Chair,
Yes,
because
yeah.
we tried the best we can
Yes.
publicly to convey
Yes.
those concerns and messages, and
They don't seem
we
to.
failed. Maybe it's because
Yeah.
we are not the holders of the purse.
Yes. No, that's fine. So maybe arrangements will have to be made for that.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I had indicated that I would deal with Mr. Van Rooyen's application for leave to cross-examine,
Yes.
and I think I must dispose of that quickly.
Yes. I believe that the legal representative of
Mr.
Mr. Van Rooyen is present,
Yeah, okay, no, that's fine.
and also for Mr. Fuzile.
Oh, they are all present.
Yes.
Okay, no, that's fine. Let me quickly, Mr. Van Rooyen brought an application for leave to cross-examine Mr. Fuzile. I suggested to all parties that it might be a good idea if I dealt with the matter in chambers and therefore without oral argument, and everybody agreed to the suggestion. I have considered the application and have reached my conclusion. The conclusion is that I do grant Mr. Van Rooyen leave to cross-examine Mr. Fuzile, and I will indicate at the commencement of the cross-examination the amount of time that I will allow for that cross-examination. And I do also grant leave so far as it may be necessary for Mr. Van Rooyen to give evidence himself as well. And in due course, arrangements will be made to fix the date for both the cross-examination of Mr. Fuzile by Mr. Van Rooyen's counsel, as well as for Mr. Van Rooyen to give evidence. That is how I dispose of that matter. We may now proceed with today's matter.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Chair, can I suggest before the oath is administered to Dr. Ramuncha that you also have at hand and ready the letter which we conversed with Mr. Marsden yesterday from Mr. Koko to Dr. Ramuncha. It's ES 1502, Annexure MMK 20.
In which file?
It is part and parcel of the documents which were presented when Mr. Marsden testified.
Oh, okay.
We have brought an extra copy in case you would need one.
Yeah, no, I've got the two letters as well as that transcript, which I don't think you will need today.
We don't need that?
You just need, it's just the two letters.
Yes, one only, the one which is marked MMK 20.
Okay. Yes.
I believe that Dr. Ramuncha is ready for taking the oath. Yes.
Okay. Please do the necessary.
Please state your full names for the record.
Tibedi Ramuncha.
Do you have any objections to taking the prescribed oath?
No.
Do you consider the oath to be binding on your conscience?
Yes.
Do you swear that the evidence you give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? If so, please raise your right hand and say, "So help me God."
So help me God.
Thank you.
Dr. Ramuncha, good morning and welcome. And let me start by apologizing for delaying your evidence. We had no control over those processes. Dr. Ramuncha, before you there will be two sets of documents. The first is the statement which you made at the request of the legal team of the Commission. Do you have it before you?
Yes.
It has been placed before the chairperson as Exhibit U3. I take it that you have had an occasion to look at that statement, read it again. Do you confirm that that is your statement?
Yes, it's my statement.
Can I establish whether or not you stand by the contents of that statement?
Certainly so, I stand by the contents of the statement, except on paragraph 15, where it says Eskom's letter of 6 November, it should be Eskom's letter of 6 December.
So it's fairly clear for anyone who read the statement that you intended to refer to December and not November.
Yes, because in other paragraphs I've referred to December.
Yes, especially paragraph 23 on page 5.
Yes.
Yes. So subject to that amendment, and Chair, can I suggest that paragraph 15, we strike out November and replace it with December?
Yes.
Because
thank you.
it's quite clear from the reading of the statement in total that he intended to refer to 6 December.
Yeah.
Certainly, we have not come across any letter of 6 November. What we have come across is the letter of 6 December.
Yeah.
Subject to that qualification, do you confirm that the contents of that statement are true to the best of your knowledge and belief?
Certainly so.
The next set of document is that letter of 6 December that you presage in the paragraph that we have just corrected. It is a statement which had not been included in the bundle of documents made available to us, correct?
Yes.
We have placed it before you.
Okay.
Can I establish why you did not include this statement of 6 December in the bundle that you made available to us?
No, I just thought that you have the letter because the investigators just said I must respond to the letter.
Oh, I see. Dr. Ramuncha, can I establish fairly quickly your background? Let me start with your qualifications that you are willing to disclose to us publicly.
Okay. I have a certificate in geology. I have a BSc honors in geology. I have an MSc engineering. I have a PhD in mineral economics.
And when did you obtain the doctoral degree?
During my time at the during my time when I was working at the Council for Geoscience.
And when was it, more or less, in
It
terms
was-
of dates?
It was around 2008, around there.
2008.
Yes.
Yes. You seem to be a man of excellent qualifications.
No, not necessary, Chairperson. I'm a person who likes academic environment. So I continuously read. In fact, not to distract you, I had even registered for an MSc at the University of Free State this year, but because of this, I cancelled.
Because of the commission?
Yes, I cancelled. I had registered, then last week they said we're starting. This week we must attend. I said, look, I'm pulling out.
Oh, Dr. Ramuncha.
That is an extraordinary
Please.
commitment to the work of the Commission, which of course we welcome, even at the loss of the University of Free State. But beyond your academic qualifications, can I establish your work experience?
I started at the bottom of the career in mining. I started as a technician, working for a company called Southern Sphere Mining and Development.
Can you speak closer to the mic?
working for a company called Southern Sphere Mining and Development. Then I went to the University of the North to go and further my studies.
When did you start working for that company?
It was in 1980 around there.
1980?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then in 1981, I went to the University of the North. I studied BSc, and after my BSc, I then did my honors in geology. After that, I then went and worked in private sector. And in private sector, I worked as an exploration geologist. I also worked as a mining geologist, going underground, all those mines in Carltonville. I worked on them, I know all of them. I then worked as a research geologist for a company called Goldfields. It's still operating. And then after some time, I joined a friend of mine. We worked as consultants in the geohydrology environment, that is groundwater, looking for water for rural development. And I then joined government. That was the time when the government was actively recruiting black professionals.
When was it?
That was in 1997.
1997?
Yes.
So it was post-independence?
Certainly so. We were amongst the first black professionals to join government. And I worked there as a director of mineral economics, because mineral economics was my area when I was working on my PhD. And then in around 2002, I was then, in around 2000, I was promoted to Chief Director, Mineral Promotion within the Department of Mineral and Energy, okay? And that was one of my, exciting times, because I was even awarded a prize for being the best senior manager in the Department of Minerals and Energy by the then Minister Mlambo-Ngcuka.
Yes.
And then in 2002, I was appointed the Deputy CEO, Chief Executive Officer of the Council for Geoscience. The Council for Geoscience is a national research institution which does research in geology across the whole country. And then in 2003, that is a year after that, I was then appointed the Chief Executive Officer of the Council for Geoscience. I served there for 8 years until 2011, when I was appointed the Director General of the Department of Mineral Resources. I did my service there.
Who was the minister at the time?
It was Minister Susan Shabangu.
Yes.
And I worked under Minister Susan Shabangu. I then worked under Minister Ramatlhodi. And then in 2016, January 2016, I left the service of the department. The then minister was Minister Zwane. I really, enjoyed my environment in public service. It was one of my greatest times there, and it was close to me. I spent plus minus 19 years working for the public service, and I worked under 7 ministers, all in all, within the family of the mining industry. And then when the time came to leave, I realized that I have to leave. It was sad for me, but I had to leave.
You indicate in your statement that you took a decision and communicated it to leave as the Director General of Mineral Resources sometime in October 2015.
Yes.
And at that time, the relevant executive authority was Minister Zwane.
Yes.
When did you leave pursuant to that decision?
Well, when Minister Zwane arrived, that was after about 5 weeks or so, plus minus around there. I remember we were flying, I can't recall the exact time, but we were flying together to Cape Town. I was next to him, and on the plane, I then said to Minister Zwane, I want to step down. for health reasons. Okay? And we never concluded our discussion. The discussions were concluded on the 10th of December. To me, it was one of my saddest days in my life. I've worked in private sector. I've worked in the public service. I've worked under many, many, many bosses, if I may use that word, chairperson. But that day, it was one of my saddest days. It teared me. I broke down. But I knew that what happened that day, it was not caused by the government of South Africa. It was not. It was not. I knew that. I knew. I know government. I knew the Department of Mineral Resources. I know government. I know everything. You know, I know. It was just some people.
It seems to be a painful moment that you were going through at that point in time. I
Yes.
wonder whether you find it in your heart to take us into your confidence and share with us what was the painful moment that led to your decision to leave the Department of Mineral Resources.
Well, when ministers change, you know, it's always not a very comfortable environment. I'll be lying, you know. You have got to adjust to the environment, adjust to how a new minister does things, okay? And sometimes when the situation is very difficult, even your health gets affected. And I just realized, look, I've run the race. Let me just step down and move on with my life and do other things, okay? But the 10th of December, let me explain it. I've already explained this to the investigators chairperson.
Yes, no, let me encourage you to explain the circumstances surrounding your stepping down.
Okay.
Because to the extent that they may be relevant to what the commission is investigating, it is very important that we get told what happened. And because we must know as much as possible, we must know the truth, and we must know all that information, because we may have to, or we have to, at some stage, confront the question, why did those things happen?
Yeah.
And why did they happen at the time that they did happen? We have to confront the questions of what is it that we could have done differently? What is it that somebody else could have done? Are there circumstances that put pressure on people not to do things the way they would have liked to be done? And if we want those things not to happen again, and not to happen to anybody, and not to happen in our own country, not to happen in government departments, what must be done? And the commission must look at that so that, if at all possible, pain that may have been suffered by certain people, certain individuals, certain people who may have been committed to the right things, to doing the right thing, should not happen again, or should not happen to others in the future. So I just want to encourage you that if it's something that is relevant to what the commission is looking at, please talk freely and inform me as much as possible of what may have happened.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairperson. I think from day one, I could see that, the rapport between myself and Minister Zwane, it was not as I expected. And there were advisors who came in. These advisors, basically, they were running the show.
Can I interrupt you? I'm sorry to do this to you, but can you give us the details of those advisors?
Okay. One was Mr. Kuben Mudli.
How do you spell Kuben?
Kuben.
Chair, you've come across this name during the course of Mr. Sentence evidence.
Okay.
And you remember the context in which you came across this name?
No, I don't remember at all.
It is a person who Mr. Sentence said that he introduced regiments to McKinsey.
Oh, okay.
And was paid a fee of 5%.
Oh, I remember Mutli. I didn't remember the name. I remember the surname. Yes. Yeah. Okay. Yes. Thank you.
Who else?
Mr. Malcolm Mabaso.
And again, you have come across this name when Mr. Fuzile testified.
Yes, I remember Mr. Mabaso, yes.
And then later on, there was a third advisor, Miss Zarina Kellerman.
Did you say Miss?
Miss, yes. Zarina, Z-A-R-I-N-A, Kellerman.
How do you spell this name?
K-E-L-L-E-R-M-A-N-N. I can just double check later and give it to you.
Thank you.
And again, I'm sorry to interrupt you. When did you, for the first time, know that these individuals were advisors to Minister Zwane?
Well, on the first day, at the swearing in at the union building, I went there to receive the minister, and that's what we do. We go there when the minister is sworn in, and they were already there at the union building.
Did you know them before? Were they people that you knew of or that you had met before?
Not, I've never interacted. It was the first time I saw them.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Yes, you may continue.
Chairperson, as I say, you just see it. If a minister and a DG, they've got to really be close. They've got to work very close. But during that time, I want to be honest, I had to work through advisors. Can you see? I had to work, got messages from advisors. And I just felt marginalized in a way. There are many things whereby advisors were talking to my staff, okay, or the staff in the department. And you don't know what is happening. You are basically lost. You are operating in a misty environment. And every time you try to connect the dots, that's what you are doing. It's one of the most frustrating environments because advisors are not supposed to run department. Advisors are not supposed to get in there and call officials of the department. If they had an issue, they should go to the DG and say, DG, minister wants this and this and this, okay? Then I interact with the minister. That is how it's supposed to be. I don't report to the advisors as a DG. I report to the minister and also politically to the deputy minister, okay? Advisors are there to advise the minister. That's all, okay? Getting into the department issues, what is happening, no, it's not supposed to be that way, Chairperson. I've been in the department which is responsible for mining for 19 years. I've worked under 7 ministers. I know how things are done. I worked under Minister Ramatlodi. He had an advisor, Mr. Mufe. I know how they interacted. Mr. Mufe would not go and just interact a lot with my staff. he would come to me and say, DG, how do you see this and this and this? Then he goes to the minister, and we used to talk, Minister Ramatlodi to say, you see, DG, that advisor, you are not reporting to that advisor, you report to me. He used to tell me that, and that's how it should be.
And that was reassuring.
Yes, it was reassuring.
Yes. Yes, continue, if in terms of telling us the circumstances surrounding your stepping down, if there's still more to tell.
Yeah, so that whole environment, Chairperson, I just realized that, look, this is the end. My health will be compromised, and let me just leave the environment as it is. There will be other things which I can do in my life. And then on the 10th of December, I was called to the office of the minister. And
was that December
2015?
2015,
Yeah.
Yes, okay.
I was called to the office of the minister. When I arrived there, I was led into the office of Mr. Mabaso, the advisor, okay? And he said...
When you were called, the impression or your understanding was that you were being called by the minister?
By the minister,
okay, yes.
Okay, so when I arrived, I was led into the office of Mr. Mabaso. And I sat there with him. We chatted, we always chatted with him now and again. Then he said to me, the minister says you must resign. I said, what? He said you must resign. He wants his resignation within 20 minutes. Okay?
This is the 10th?
The 10th.
Of December 2015?
Yes.
And he had been sworn in when? He had been there for some time?
23rd September.
Oh, of 2015?
2015, yes.
Okay.
Then I said, what is this? Where's the minister? The minister?
It was a shock to you?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Where's the minister? The minister was in his office, about 5 meters, plus minus 5 meters from the office of Mr. Mabaso.
Yes.
You see, the office of the minister is a big office with sub-offices. So the minister would have his own there, a secretary there, a PA, and then the advisors there.
Yes.
So the minister was in his office,
yes.
maybe somewhere 5 meters from where I was. Said, here am I, I'm getting fired, just like that. Then I said to Mr. Mabaso, okay, I want to leave then. I will leave now, immediately. You said you want the resignation, minister want the resignation within 20 minutes, I'll give it, but I'm packing my things, I'm going home today. Okay? And he said, no, DG, can't you just wait, and so that things will fall apart, let's make sure that things are smooth when you leave. I then looked at it, I thought about it. Once more I said, let me do it for my country. Let me stay. It's not about some people, it's about my country, it's the department I've worked for 19 years. And I said, okay, I'll go and sign that letter. I went to my office there and put it together. I have one of my colleagues in my office helped me type it together, put it together there. We finalized it. I signed the letter. Then I went there within that 20 minutes. I made sure that I do it within 20 minutes. And Chairperson, I knew my rights. I would have said no. I would have gone to CCMA, I would have gone to the league, I would have taken legal advice. But I just said, you know what? This is good riddance for me. Let me do it in that 20 minutes of theirs. Then from there, so I said, I'll serve notice until 31st of January 2016. And I'll see what I can do, assist whatever. And I did it till January, even after I had left, okay? Some of the staff members would call me and say, Dr. Ramunja, can you assist us with this and this? I would drive to Pretoria with my own petrol, never ask any cent. I did it because I was doing this thing for the country. And I just made peace with the situation and say, one day things will be fine. Okay? And I used to go there. I remember, I think some speeches, they sent me some speech, I could look at it, work on it. After I had left, and after I sent it back to them. I said, look, it's fine. But then I was never bitter. Even today, I'm not.
And those would have been speeches for the minister or what?
Yeah, I think, I can't recall properly. I've got
Yes.
some emails, if you want,
Yes.
some of the things I looked at, they sent to me.
Yeah.
The acting
DG.
DG
Yeah.
used to communicate with me.
Yes.
Yes.
Did you ever speak to the Minister Zwane on that day when his advisor told you that he wanted your resignation letter within 20 minutes?
No, at all. After he was giving my letter, and I was going out, as I said, it's just in his office. He was working there. I saw him there. He had a phone, something like that, if I can recall. Just say, I think he just said DG, and that's it.
Yeah.
That's it. Not even saying to me, DG, I want us to part ways. That's it.
And prior to this day, when his advisor said the minister wanted your resignation letter, had there been any discussion between the two of you at all about a possibility of you stepping down?
Yes, as I said, we were flying to Cape Town, and I was seated next to him.
Yes.
I told him that I want to step down.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. But do you recall round about when that flight was in relation to the date when you were asked to put in a resignation letter? Is it a month or a week's time?
No, it's about a month. I think it was around October.
In your statement, you said October.
Yes, I said in around October
okay.
there. I can't exactly recall the date. Maybe, I
Yeah,
can't
but
recall.
what was his reaction to your statement in the flight when you said you think you should step down? What was his reaction to that?
We never concluded. He said, when? I said, look, we can talk about it. We can talk about it. Yeah. But we never concluded. We just left it as it is.
Okay, and then the next thing was this particular day when Mr. Mabaso said the minister wanted your resignation letter.
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
And to conclude that part
Yes.
of mine at the department,
Yes.
and then sometime in January, he said to me, DG, I'm offering you a job as a CEO of one of the entities, South African Diamond and Precious Metal Regulator. So I declined the offer.
Yes.
I declined the offer. I said, thank you so much, Minister, but I'm fine.
Yeah.
I'm fine.
Yeah. If I could ask, was your decision to decline it connected in any way with the fact that you may have thought that the two of you did not have, had not been able to achieve a good rapport with each other? You said earlier on that you could tell that there was no good rapport between the two of you.
Yeah.
Was it connected with that, or it was simply because you had other arrangements?
No, I didn't have other arrangements.
Yes.
Nothing. I
Yes.
didn't have any plans.
Yes.
I just reflected over it during the holidays.
Yes.
I reflected it. I remember even if I can recall, my family went on holiday. I didn't go on holiday. I just stayed alone during the holidays. I reflected on it. And then I said, let me start a new life. It will be there. And I'm glad that I've started a new life. I'm working as a consultant in South Africa and outside South Africa, and also I'm an honorary adjunct professor at the University of Witwatersrand. I sit on the advisory committee of the School of Mining Engineering to advise them. So there are many things which are happening with my life. It took time, but you can see that things are happening. There will always be possibilities if you work hard in life. Yes.
No, thank you, Dr. Ramuncha, for that. But there is just one part which I would like you to expand on, if you are able to. You did say that the role that Minister Zwane's advisors were playing in the department was not the role that they should be playing.
Yes.
So I would like you to expand on that and tell me more in terms of what it is that they were doing at a factual level, which really shouldn't have been done by advisors, should have been left to you or other officials and so on. I would like you to expand on that if you are able to.
Yes, I think, Chairperson, the heart of everything is you can't work via advisors as a DG. You know, you have to directly talk to the minister. You have to directly talk to the deputy minister. You can't work through advisor. It just becomes impossible. It doesn't work. And that is the gist of everything which I experienced, you know. And maybe that's how he wanted things to be done, and maybe it's how he wanted, that's fine. But it is difficult for me. It was difficult then for me to accept that. Then I said, look, I cannot. But there are other things which I had after, you know. At some point I was told that the advisors would tell the chief inspector of mines, okay, to go and inspect mines, you know. And maybe the chief inspector can explain that, you know, because I was marginalized. Nobody would come to me and tell, but he told me that, look, I was supposed to, I've been asked to go and inspect mines. I said, what is this? In fact, when you look at those things, they're not supposed to be done that way. I can even tell the chief inspector of mines, go and inspect this mine. It's not right. Okay, the chief inspector of mine has got powers in terms of Mine Health and Safety Act. He's the one who must decide, and they've got their own program. And once you start to say, go to this mine, go to this one, it's not the work of the minister, it's not the work of the DG, it's the work of the chief inspector of mines, who is at the DDG level. So when he told me this, I said, hey, what can I do? It was a very, it's one of those things. And there was this project, maybe we can, the Optimum project, okay? The Optimum project, Chairperson, during Minister Ramatlodi's time, okay? It was run by officials. The DDG responsible for it, Mr. Joel Rapila, was the one who would run it, would come to me and tell me what is happening, DG, and we understood what was happening, okay? But then, when Minister Zwane came on board, they centralized that project inside the office of the minister. Basically, yes, yes, it was centralized. I was not aware what was now happening. Yes, that was how it was.
And when you say it was centralized in Minister Zwane's office, what do you mean? Is that where certain decisions were being taken, or what exactly do you mean?
I was in the dark about
as DG.
As DG. I was totally in the dark about what is happening. Totally, totally. And the DDG would come to me and almost whispering to me, we were there, and I said, what's happening? We were there, there's this thing. I think even when they went to Zurich, and there was, the environment was just, for me, I think the style was not the way I expected. And I can't force a minister to operate in a particular way. It's up to the minister to decide how he or she wants to run her or his office.
You said, you referred to when they went to Zurich.
Chair, I'd like to explore that topic in detail.
Explore it.
So if I could get to it in time, if you don't mind.
Okay, all right, explore it.
Yes. Well,
Or you want to lay a foundation first?
Yes, I want to discuss other background issues.
Okay, no,
if you
that's
don't mind,
fine.
I'll get to
That's
it.
fine.
Yes,
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
But let's do this. So you have finished the circumstances surrounding your stepping down as far as you are concerned in terms of telling
Yes,
us.
I have.
Okay,
I have,
thank you.
Chairperson. I
Okay.
have.
Chair, thank you. Do you know Mr. Enoch Godongwana?
Yes, I know him very well. He was at some point the advisor to Minister Susan Shawang when I was the DG.
Yes. So it's someone that you would fairly know well and have had some communication with.
Yes, yes. He is a leader within the ANC, and I would interact with him
Yes.
on many issues, especially in terms of mining issues, because he was responsible for economic issues.
Yes.
So we talk about issues.
Yes. Mr. Fuzile came here to say something which was communicated to him by Mr. Enoch Godongwana.
Yes.
I wonder whether you had followed what his testimony before the chairperson was, because it was a public testimony. Do you know what Mr. Fuzile said to the chairperson about Mr. Godongwana?
I missed that, but then my brother told me and said I didn't hear what he said, but my brother mentioned something like Mr. Fuzile phoned Mr. Godongwana, and Mr. Godongwana said, hey, if you want to know more about these issues, go and consult.
Well, let me recap it for you so that at least you would be able to comment it as closely as possible to the accuracy of his testimony.
Okay.
Chair, as I recall, he said that after Minister Van Rooyen was appointed, remember after the fateful 9 December 2015 announcement, Mr. Godongwana called him and said to him, you're going to get a Gupta minister. And that minister would come with his advisors or her advisors. And generally, he or she would not know those advisors. And if it's necessary, he, Mr. Fuzile, must ask you about those things. What I want to establish, of course, we'll call Mr. Godongwana to come and put his version in due course. We're making arrangements in that regard. Okay. What I want to understand is, did you ever had a...
Maybe before that, Mr. Malega, I don't know whether your recollection is correct to the extent that you say it was after after the appointment. My recollection was that one of the things that was intriguing was that, as I understood it, Mr. Fuzile said he had that conversation with Mr. Godongwana before the announcement was made.
Oh yes, you could be correct, Chair.
And the intriguing thing was how he would have known in advance.
Yes, and that's the only issue I want to explore.
Yeah.
Thank you for that reminder. So what I want to establish is, did you ever had a discussion with Mr. Godongwana about the appointment of so-called Gupta ministers and their advisors?
No, Chairperson, I can't recall. Yeah, can't recall.
Or maybe let me put it like this. As far as I can recall, Mr. Fuzile testified that I think on the day on which the announcement about the dismissal of Mr. Nene and the appointment of his replacement, on the day before that announcement was made, and if I recall correctly, it was made in the evening in terms of the evidence, He was on his way, I don't know whether he was on his way home in the afternoon or somewhere, and he received a call from Mr. Godongwana. And in their conversation, Mr. Godongwana talked, I think there had already been rumors that Mr. Nene was going to be fired. And Mr. Godongwana said that Mr. Fuzile was going to get a Gupta minister, and that the Gupta minister would arrive with advisors, and that that minister would not even be knowing those advisors. And he suggested that Mr. Fuzile should talk to you. My impression was that Mr. Godongwana was saying to Mr. Fuzile, if you want to know more about what I'm talking about or about these situations, talk to Dr. Ramunja. That was my impression of the evidence. So I think in that context, it is in that context that Mr. Malega is asking whether there's anything that you are able to tell us on that would have formed the basis for Mr. Godongwana to think that you could assist Mr. Fuzile to understand what was about to happen in his department.
Chairperson, we never discussed this with Mr. Fuzile. No, we never discussed that.
No, I understand that, but the point is, the pain that you're going through in the department at that point in time, did you ever discuss it with anyone?
With Mr. Godongwana?
Anyone?
No. My family, I discussed it with my family, mostly. But my staff in my office, they knew it. I think in the corridors, people would see it. Yeah. I didn't discuss it. I can't remember discussing it with anyone. But I'll discuss it with my family, say this is what is happening, and what can I do?
Right, Chair, I'd like now to move to the substance
Yes.
of Dr. Ramuncha's evidence. Dr. Ramuncha, you were called by the Commission to explain circumstances leading to the letter that was sent to Eskom under your name. You annexed that letter as TR1 to your statement.
Okay.
Chair, you'll find TR1 on page 13 of U3. Are you there, Dr. Ramucha?
Yes.
You will see if you go to...
Let me try and find it. Is U3 and annexure in the same file?
in the same file where you find the statement of Dr. Ramucha.
Because behind the statement there is no annexure. And this is not a file where you can tell me a paginated page number.
Paginated page number on my documentation is TR13 and TR14. Do you have an extra copy? No, TR1.
Well, something really needs to be done about these things. I've got TR1, 2. You said TR14.
13 and 14.
Yeah, something just needs to be done. with regard to even the pagination, it's quite convenient if there is a pagination that covers the whole liver arch file, because then that makes it easier. Okay, I've got it.
Can I ask you to go to page 2 of that letter, which is TR 14? Do you see that?
Yes.
You will see that your name appears on that page, correct?
Yes.
And there's a signature above that name.
Yeah.
Is that your signature?
Certainly so, Chairperson.
Okay. I therefore assume that you signed this letter,
Yes.
but there was no date to that letter. There is provision for dates,
Yeah.
but it had not been completed.
Yes.
Do I take it that you signed the letter without putting the dates to indicate when you signed it?
Well, when I signed this letter, I then thought that I could revisit the letter.
We'll come to the circumstances.
Okay.
But all I want to confirm at this stage is that you did not put a date
Yes.
to indicate when you signed it.
Yes, Chairperson.
Correct. We will get to the circumstances, and I'm not trying to exclude you from explaining the context and circumstances why you did not put the date. But can I remind you of this context? That you signed this letter as a result of a letter that was sent to you by Eskom under the hand of Mr. Koko. That's the letter that I ask you to look at. It's not part of your statement. Is that letter which is marked MMK20?
Yes, Chairperson.
And you will see that page 2 of MMK20 is signed by Mr. Koko on the 6th of December 2015, correct?
Yes, Chairperson.
So your letter, TR13 and TR14, was an attempt to respond to Mr. Koko's letter.
Yes, Chairperson.
We'll get to the context, to the contents of it. But let me establish matters of context, one of which will deal with a topic the chairperson raised, and I said I will like to deal with, and that is the trip of Minister Zwane to Zurich. The context at that point in time, as I understand, is that one of Eskom's coal suppliers, Optimum coal mine, and I take it that you know that mine, you know who operates it, correct?
Yes.
You also indicated in your statement that Minister Ramatlodi tried to intervene in regard to attempts by Optimum mine at the time to reduce their staff. Did you know at that point in time that Optimum coal mine was under business rescue?
At what time?
When you received the letter of Mr. Koko?
Okay. Yes, I know because it was in the news and even the department was involved. And the issues of Optimum, in fact, started to come to the department during Minister Ramatlodi's time. I remember at some point I was even in a meeting where Minister Ramatlodi was there. There was Dr. Ngubane, there was Mr. Mulefe, and my DDG, Mr. Rapela, was also there. So we were 4 in that meeting when also they discussed this issue. So I knew that there were these issues.
And yesterday the chairperson had the evidence of one of the business rescue practitioners, Mr. Marsden. Mm-hmm. Had you met him during the stage when Optimum coal mine was in business rescue?
No, I never met him. My DDG, Mr. Rapela, was the person who was basically interacting with all the stakeholders which are involved in this, which was natural. It's his area, So he was the person who would be interacting with them. I don't know if he did meet them one-to-one, but he used to tell me that they are holding meetings and this and these things are happening. It's fine.
When you received that letter, it was after Tegeta had made an offer to purchase, amongst others, Optimum coal mine, and that offer had been accepted by Optimum coal mine and its line of parent companies, including Glencore. Were you aware of the fact that there had been a sale agreement?
No, I was not aware.
When you received that letter, Minister Zwane had 5 days earlier had gone to Zurich to meet with Mr. Glassenberg, who at the time was the head of Glencore. Were you aware of the trip?
I was aware because the way it works in the department, when the minister goes overseas, he gets permission from the president. Then the minister would then decide who he wants or she wants to accompany her or him. And in this case, my DDG was asked to accompany the minister. So there are documentations which are signed to this effect, which will come to me, and we recommend to the minister for the minister to approve the DDG to go abroad. And also, I will be sort of approving the costs which will be incurred.
Indeed, because you're the accounting officer.
Yes.
So the costs relating to that trip,
Yes.
to the extent that they would be paid by your department,
Yes.
you have to authorize them.
Yes.
And I take it that you authorized them and you became aware that Minister Zwane was traveling to Zurich.
Yes.
The chairperson received evidence that at that meeting where Minister Zwane met Mr. Glassenberg, he was accompanied by someone called Mr. Salim Essa, who, let me first ask you this, do you know Mr. Salim Essa?
No, I don't know.
Had you met him before?
No, no.
Mr. Essa was introduced at that meeting with Mr. Glassenberg as the advisor to the minister. Do you or don't you know that Mr. Essa, at some or other point, played a role as the advisor to the minister, Minister Zwane?
No, no. As I said, there were 2 advisors. Then there was the third one also when I left, but she was not fully appointed also.
You have looked at the documentation relating to that trip, you know the costs, and you know who's going there. Did the documentation ever indicate to you what was the purpose of the trip to Zurich?
No, and as far as I recall, it did not specify the issues of Glencore. It was like ministers going abroad. I think, if I can recall, this thing happened a long time ago, that they are going there to meet investors. I'm speaking under correction. But it didn't have the details about Optimum, what, no.
It did not have those details?
Yes, as far as I can recall. I will have to really look at it, but I can't remember having those things in that there will be a meeting whereby the minister will meet with people of Optimum together with the people of Glencore. I can't remember. I'll have to double check that.
Could you? Because it is important to understand precisely whether you as the DG knew what was the purpose of the trip.
Okay.
The chairperson received evidence from, amongst others, a witness called Mr. Clinton Efren, who indicated that the sale of the Optimum mine was discussed at 2 meetings in Zurich. The first was the meeting of 1 December 2015. The second was the 2nd of December 2015. Do you know anything about those meetings?
No. Chairperson, when it comes to the issue of Optimum, it was basically run in the office of the minister, and things would come in drips and drabs to me. That's how that was the situation.
Now, you said that your department began to be involved in on issues relating to Optimum during Minister Ramatlodi's time.
Yes.
During Minister Ramatlodi's time, who was dealing with those issues? I mean, you just told us that, if I recall correctly, issues relating to Optimum became centralized in Minister Zwane's time during Minister Zwane's in Minister Zwane's office during his time. During Minister Ramatlodi's time, were they being handled by the department's officials in the normal course?
Certainly so, Chairperson. There were the DDG, Mr. Rapila was driving them, but he
was keeping you informed.
Oh, so much. You tell me that there's this meeting, we're meeting the unions, there's this thing. So it was so transparent that you get comfort. And that is how you must be, because as a DG, you can't be everywhere. You can't be to all these meetings. But he used to tell me there's this and this. And also I remember at some point, there was even a black consortium which approached me. We were in a meeting, so at the department, they said, look, we want to acquire Optimum. Can you just assist us, DG? We don't often get involved in those things, but I then said, look, I will see what I can do if there are challenges, especially if it is a black-owned company. Let's see if we cannot assist to address the issues of transformation. And I called Mr. Clinton Ephron, and I discussed this issue with him. He said, okay, fine, it seems they don't have money, those people. And then I left it there. The two gentlemen who were interested are Mr. Sipho Dube and Mr. Peter Temani.
Yes.
Yes. So that was, everything was, I knew what was happening. It was fine. Minister Ramatlodi would be informed about issues. He would come in when there are serious issues which have to be tackled. But he would leave everything to us.
Okay, going back to the trip to Zurich. So, did your DDG go with the minister?
Certainly so, Chairperson.
The one who was dealing with issues relating to Optimum?
Yes.
Yes.
And if I may add, Chair.
Yes.
And then some time after he came back, I can't remember which day, he came to my office, we were talking about other things, and then he said, look, I said, how was your trip there? Then he said, yes, it was fine. We went to Glencoe, but he was not allowed to enter into a meeting.
Into the meeting?
Yes, so he was outside, So this is the environment, so I just left it as it is. Just said, okay, that's fine.
Do you know whether that DDG is still there?
No, the DDG is no longer there.
Yeah, what was his name again?
Mr. Joel Rapila.
Mr. Joel Rapila.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. What I find surprising is that an important project such as Optimum Coal Mine was something that you were involved in during the time Minister Ramatlodi was a minister. And when Minister Zwane takes over, you are not involved in that project.
Yes.
Can you explain to us why you as the DG did not become involved in that project during the ministerial position of Mr. Zwane?
It perplexed me, Chairperson. I just thought that's the style. I mean, ministers have got powers to decide how they run a department, okay?
No, with respect, it is not the minister who runs the department. It is you as the DG who runs the department.
I agree, Chairperson, but then...
You are telling us what happened
yes,
when he started.
Yes. There are certain things you can do as a DG, Chairperson, but there are certain things, if your minister wants to do things this way, you can't stop that person. So when they decided to centralize it there, I just said, what can I do? There's nothing I could do, but it's what happened. I'm just relaying what happened.
I understand. Chair, with your leave, I'd like to probe this question further.
Yeah, do.
I understand the difficult and the oppressive circumstances you're working in.
Okay.
I empathize with them. Don't misunderstand me. But it seems to me from what you're telling us that there was a takeover of your functions and duties as the DG to run the department. Is that a fair reflection of what happened during that time?
I think, yes, to some extent, not all functions, but to some extent, this one was one of the projects which was basically taken away from me.
Beyond the style of Minister Zwane as a minister to interface with you as the head of the DMR, can you think of any reason why the Optimum project will be excluded from your line responsibilities?
I don't know why would this happen. But with all this inquiry happening, you started to say, look, you know, perhaps some people had to be favored, you know. I don't have clear evidence, but now you start to join the dots. Now you start to see with this inquiry, say, okay, this looks like perhaps the Gupta people were basically being assisted, sort of, you know, for using that word, Mr. Gupta's family was trying to be assisted. That's how I view it now.
And I suggest to you that that must have been the reason, because when I look at the letter of Mr. Koko and your response to that letter, your letter talks to things which Mr. Koko did not raise, at least expressly, in his letter to you.
Yeah.
We'll get to the precise details of how your letter raised things which even Mr. Koko did not raise.
Okay.
But do you accept as a general proposition that your response was talking about details which were not in Mr. Koko's letter?
Yes.
Before we get to those details, can I ask you to simply explain to us the process of formulating this letter, because I sense from your statement that you did not prepare that letter.
Yes.
Can you just take us through the basic steps as far as you can recall? Who started with the draft? How it was presented to you for signature?
Maybe before that, let's talk about Mr. Koko's letter to you. You said, or at least maybe your statement says, you don't remember how it got to you, but it got to you at a certain stage. Is that right?
Sorry?
The letter addressed to you from Mr. Koko?
Yes.
Your statement says, if I recall correctly, that you don't recall how it got to you, but it did get to you. Is that right?
Certainly so, Chair.
Yes. Now, did you at any stage give it to or a copy thereof to the Minister, Minister Zwane, or any of his advisors, or any of his staff?
No, I did not. I did
Yes.
not.
And before you signed your response to Mr. Koko, at the time that you did, were you aware that maybe the minister might be having this letter, or somebody or one of his advisors might be having it?
It was my presumption.
Yeah, but
That-
you didn't
yeah.
know for sure.
Yes. It
Okay.
can happen that a letter comes to me, there's a copy of it going to the DDG or to the office of the minister. Yeah.
Yes,
So I just assume that, yeah.
but wouldn't normally the letter show that it's been copied to somebody else?
No.
That's what normally happens.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, Mr. Malega, you can take.
Thank you, Chair. Can I ask you to turn to the letter that you signed? And again, before I get to the contents of it, I would ask you to clarify for us how this letter was formulated. In other words, did you sit behind the computer, dictate it, or type it, or did someone present the draft to you?
No, it came as a draft to my office.
And do you know who formulated the draft?
I don't know who formulated the draft. I just assume that it comes from the office of the minister, because they have been working on these issues.
All right. So you knew nothing about who formulated the draft? Do you know who gave it to you in draft form, as far as you can recall?
No, I found it in my in-tray.
In tray.
Yes.
And was there any expectation that you should look at it and sign it as a reflection of a response to Mr. Koko's letter?
Yes, when you get into our office, you find documents, you look at them, and you assess the risk associated with that document. You sign it, or sometime you say, look, let me clarify. And sometime I used to take work home and go through the things over the weekend, and some of them I sign, some of them I go and get the clarity on them. So this is the situation. I saw it. I looked at this letter. I looked at this letter of Mr. Koko, and I knew that there were issues which are happening with regards to this project. And I just said, look, let me just see if this cannot help. I just signed it.
Was it normal for you as DG, to receive draft letters from the office of the minister or any of the previous ministers in circumstances where you had not known in advance that somebody would prepare a draft for you?
It's not normal, and what also comforted me when I looked at the letter, it also had the name of my DDG as inquiry. Then I said, okay, perhaps they've been working together on this thing, and that is what comforted me.
Was it normal for you to receive draft letters, draft responses to letters addressed to you from any of your officials in circumstances where you had not discussed the possibility of them doing a draft for you?
No, it's normal. You can find, maybe there's a project they're working on.
Yes.
They will discuss issues and say, let's prepare this letter for the DG to sign.
But I'm talking about a circumstance where you had received a letter. In other words, somebody had addressed a letter to you, somebody from outside, maybe to be specific, and then you have not discussed with anybody the possibility of that person drafting a response for you, and then suddenly you get a response, a draft response.
It's, the abnormality is not normal, and the way things are, we could see that there's something not right.
Because I see, I can understand as DG, you just said a while ago that as DG you can't be everywhere and you can't do everything. Obviously you have to rely on DTGs, you have to rely on other officials, and I can understand that very often, maybe on a daily basis, one or other official is dealing with a matter where they need you to make some decision, or they need you to write some letter to somebody, and therefore they might draft it for you. That I can understand. So I'm more concerned about a situation where you receive a letter from outside the department that is addressed to you, and then you get a draft response from somebody without that person having had any discussion with you, or you having had any discussion with that person about the possibility of them drafting a response for you.
It's not normal, Chairperson. It's not normal. Maybe it could have happened, but it's not something which is normal. What was normal is what you referred to earlier.
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
that was it's common.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yes.
Mr. Malaga.
Thank you, Chair. Dr. Ramuncha, you're quite correct. When you look at the letter that you signed, right at the top does indicate that inquiries must be directed to Mr. J. Rapella, and his email is given. So that's the assurance that gave you that you could look at this letter and deal with it.
Yes.
Yes, fair enough. Now, I'm going to take you through the contents of that letter. And I'm going to do so on the premise that you're quite comfortable that someone formulated the draft without talking to you, and someone formulated a draft on matters that you had not been previously involved about Optimum coal mine. Is that a fair premise to proceed from?
Yes, Chairperson.
Look at paragraph 1, the unnumbered paragraph. Chair, I'm at TR 13.
Yes.
It says, receipt of your letter addressed to the department pertaining to the intervention required from the department refers, correct?
Yes.
And it was quite clear when you read Mr. Koko's letter that he required the department to intervene
Yes.
broadly in all the coal supply problems Eskom had regarding various mines and various power stations.
Yes.
And then the second unnumbered paragraph reads as follows. Having regard to the above, we would like to advise as follows, colon, in respect of Hendrina Power Station, the department will prioritize and fast-track approvals for the transfer of mining right on an urgent basis, should this be lodged. Can I stop there? There is nothing in the letter of Mr. Koko to which this letter is a response. That raised questions around transfer of mining rights. Do you accept that? That when you read Mr. Koko's letter, it does not refer at all to transfer of a mining right. Correct?
I agree, I agree. It doesn't refer to that.
And secondly, it doesn't even request the department to intervene on an urgent basis regarding a mining right. Correct?
Yes, it doesn't refer to that.
So that part of the response drafted by someone without your engagement, it responds to something that has not been asked by Mr. Koko.
Okay,
Correct?
that's fine.
Yes. Let's proceed then. We have already requested an urgent meeting with the Competition Commission to go and plead the case and explain the urgency with which it must be treated, as it is indeed a special case, given the consequences for the country. again, Mr. Koko's letter does not even talk about the Competition Commission, correct?
Yes.
It doesn't even talk about an agent approach to the Competition Commission, correct?
Yes.
There is nothing in that letter referring to the importance of national interest relating to an agent approach to the Commission, correct?
Yes.
So in sum, from beginning to the end, this second paragraph responds to nothing that Mr. Koko had requested by way of intervention from the department, correct?
Yes.
Why then, as far as you are aware, someone would ask you to sign a letter purporting to respond to the agent intervention by the department requested by Mr. Koko and raise issues which Mr. Koko did not seek intervention on?
Okay.
Can you think of any reason why that would happen?
Well, the reason would be that there are people who have been discussing this issue of Optimum, and they then said, let's come with a proposal. Let's come with a letter to be sent to Eskom, and that is what I would say so. There would be people who would be looking at all these issues, discussing them, and they said, okay, let's respond to this letter in this manner.
That is a heightened deception by whoever formulated this letter.
Certainly so, Chairperson. When I look now, where I am now, I looked at the letter of Mr. Koko. The letter of Mr. Koko, I mean, I had no reason to distrust a person of Mr. Koko's stature, standing. He was the head of electricity generation in the country. So when you get a letter like this, and the letter paints a very dire situation for the country. If you look at that letter, it was a precarious environment for the country which is coming. It has got deadlines that, I mean, by end of January 2016, there would be the end of the end for this country in terms of electricity supply. And now you can see that these things are connected. He pointed that there are at least 3 power stations which are at risk of not supplying electricity to the country if urgent issues are not addressed, if no interventions are put in place. Hendrina, he says 2,000 megawatts is at risk. He talked about the Anod power station that come end of December, the contract is at risk. And when you look at the letter, it says the only available coal which will suit them is coal from Optimum, I think so, something like that. And then he talks about Gomati power station also at risk. So it painted this dire situation for the country that when I saw this thing, I said, hi, you know, what can I do? Maybe this thing can help. And I'm saying this, Chairperson, because I have in the past been involved in addressing issues, crisis issues, okay? We have gone out to look at issues of saving jobs. And this also touched on saving jobs because Optimum had plus minus 3,700, I think, employees, including contractors who were working there. It was also a dire situation from my point, not from the electricity situation. Electricity situation, Mr. Koko can talk about it. But from our side was, can we save jobs? So there were 2 issues which I looked at when I saw the letter. There was the issues of the jobs. I said, here, you know, if this thing can help, let me sign it, okay? Because in the past, we have done unconventional things, and unconventional things to save jobs. Okay? In 1999, for instance, if I may expand on that, Chairperson, there was a gold crisis in the country. The gold price was at around 290. and now, I mean, today is about $1,300, you know. So jobs were lost. And I was appointed to be the secretariat to address this. We did conventional things. Ministers were meeting every Monday, you know. We went to the mines, things which we often never did. In 2014, I think, so 2014 or 2014 or so, there were about 14,000 jobs which were going to be lost at Anglo Platinum, okay? We did a conventional thing. I stopped whatever I was doing. I sat with all the stakeholders. For 2 weeks, we find alternatives to job losses. In fact, at the end of it, when we signed that agreement, we had almost saved all the jobs, okay? And so unconventional things have been done in the past. So when I saw this letter, I reflected on what we have been done. As long as things are done within the law, Chairperson, it's fine. And I want to address the issue maybe right now of the relationship between us and Eskom, Chairperson, okay? As a department of,
Yes.
Department of Mineral Resources. Eskom, one, does not report to the Department of Mineral Resources. That's number one.
Yes.
Eskom reports to the Department of Public Enterprise.
Indeed.
Okay? Two, a DG of any department can give directives to Eskom. In fact, I could have just not even signed this letter.
And that's a point, Dr.
Yes.
Ramuncha, that the request for intervention
Yes.
is sent to your department, which
Yeah.
you were the head at that point in time.
Yeah.
And yet it is not sent to the executive authority who is responsible for Eskom for intervention, because normal minister-to-minister protocol relationship
Yes.
would have required that any intervention ought to begin with that executive authority responsible for Eskom, for him to approach your department for any possibility of intervention. Here is Eskom approaching you directly for intervention, and yet it is not doing the same thing to its minister.
Before you answer that, please don't forget that question.
Okay.
Mr. Maleka intervened while you were telling me something. Had you finished telling me about the relationship between Eskom and your department?
Okay.
I want to give you a chance to finish telling me that if you had not finished.
Okay.
Okay.
The relationship between the Department of Mineral Resources and Eskom is an indirect one. It's indirect in the sense that the Department of Mineral Resources regulates the mining industry, okay, including the coal mining industry. So Eskom gets coal from the mines to generate electricity. That is the relationship which is there, okay? I also am surprised now that I hear that Advocate Maleka says a letter was not even sent to the Department of Public Enterprise. It's actually bringing certain things to me. How? I thought maybe they also send something like that, asking for assistance. So that is why I'm saying Eskom cannot even get a directive from a DG of Department of Mineral Resources, even from the Minister of Mineral Resources. The only person who can give a directive to Eskom is the Minister of Public Enterprise in terms of corporate governance issues, and the Minister of Energy in terms of policy issues. Okay? That is how it is. But this issue now would be corporate governance issues. Any directive that comes from the Minister of Public Enterprise, even then, the Minister of Public Enterprise would have to take that information and give it to the chairperson of the board of Eskom, who would have to give it to the board and discuss it and say, this is what is in front of us, what do we do? So After signing this letter, and maybe I must touch on something else. Is it fine?
Yeah, if it explains more the relationship, tell me.
Okay. And the letter will just, I don't know how it went out of my office, that's one thing. And
Or the one you signed?
yes, I
Yeah.
don't know how it went out of my office. And I spoke to my former secretary, and I asked her just to find out and trace, because what happens in my former office is we used to record incoming mail and outgoing mail. But this one, she couldn't find it. It's very strange, you know? And I just, I was busy with other things, and I just hear that it surfaced in Parliament when some officials of Eskom were defending their actions using this letter.
So although you had signed the letter,
Yeah.
you had not intended it to leave your office as yet when it left.
No.
And that is why you had not put the date on which you signed it, because you wanted to revisit it.
Yes.
From what you have said before.
Yes.
So you didn't authorize it being sent away, sent off to the addressee.
No.
It was taken from your office under circumstances that you don't know.
Yes.
And you tried to find out afterwards by asking your secretary whether there had been any recording as to when it was taken, and you couldn't find anything.
Very strange, because especially letters coming from outside, where we record that this letter came in on such and such a day, this one went out. So there is a record which is kept in the DG's office, you know.
Okay.
Dr. Ramuncha, we will explore later on whether this letter had the authority of the board of Eskom or even the Minister of Public Enterprises. I'm not going to ask you to comment on this, but I'm grateful that you have tabled the governance process around how Eskom should officially communicate with your department. Now, Chair, I had raised yesterday with Mr. Marsden the condition precedents relating to the sale of agreement, requiring the approval of the Competition Commission, requiring the consent of the Minister of Mineral Resources for the transfer of the mining right.
Yes.
And also requiring the consent of Eskom to the transaction. All of those things in terms of the agreement had to be achieved by the 31st of January 2016. And you would recall that that agreement imposing those conditions precedents was signed on the 10th of October, so the 10th of December 2015. Of course, Dr. Ramuncha does not know anything about this. But what I find surprising is that even at that point in time when this response is sent to Eskom, the obligation to implement these condition precedents had not yet kicked in. So the response is anticipating matters in the agreement which had not yet been included. So it seems, if I may suggest this to Dr. Ramuncha against the context of what I have raised with the chairperson, that someone who was writing this response must have had some understanding of what was required in terms of this agreement relating to the approval of the Competition Commission, the consent of the minister, and also the consent of Eskom. And that is why that paragraph I've read to you talked to those matters, even though Mr. Koko did not raise them. Of course, you did not know anything about these things.
Yes, I did not.
Chair, I'd like to go to the next part of the letter, unless you have some questions.
Before you do so, so there's some there's something quite strange about these letters. The one that was addressed to you by Mr. Koko reached you, but if I recall correctly, you said you don't remember who brought it to you. Is that right?
Yes, Chairperson.
Do you know whether it came to you by, it would have come to you through the normal mail, post, or it would have been delivered by hand or anything? Do you know?
It looks now that it has been delivered by hand, but as I said, you know, we have got a system in the DG's office when I was still a DG, whereby all the mails would be recorded as they come in and they go out. Very few mails, maybe, you know, of the corporate services, because we're on the same floor. The DDG corporate service would come to me and say, DG, there's this thing, then we look at it. But generally, especially mails from outside, they would have been recorded. It came here, mails from the ministry will be recorded, and then as it goes out, it have to be recorded. So strange when I asked my former PA to investigate that, he said, no, there's nothing, you can't trace it.
So the one from Mr. Koko was also not recorded?
Yes.
And your PA also didn't know how it came to be on your desk, or
she can't recall anything. I spoke to her
yeah,
after I met
but at that time, did you ask her at that time, or you only asked her recently?
No, recently, yes.
Or at that time you didn't ask her about how it came?
No, I did not ask Chairperson.
Yes. But the one that you signed in response, you did ask her about whether anything was recorded about how it left your office.
Yes, I did ask
That
her.
one you did ask her
Yes.
at that time?
No, not at that time.
Only recently?
Only recently. As I said, Chairperson, if I may add, that after that, I just, you know, continued with my work until these things surfaced in Parliament. I just said, what is this now? You know? Yeah.
But what I'm trying to understand from your side is, if you receive a letter such as the one you received from Mr. Koko, and you didn't know how it came, and then the next thing, without you having spoken to anybody about the contents of that letter and having asked that person to draft a possible response for you, you find a draft response on your desk without knowing who brought it. You sign it. You don't put a date when you signed it. You intend to revisit it. Before you revisit it, it disappears. All of those things seem strange to me. I'm wondering why you shouldn't have been quite concerned and take steps to really establish what was happening.
Chairperson, I agree with you. And in hindsight, I should have looked at it differently. But as I said, you know, after I signed it, I thought I could revisit it. But then I got caught up with other things in the office, you know? And until...
I can understand being caught up and forgetting
Yes.
that there was a letter that you wanted to revisit. That I can understand. But I'm concerned about a situation where at some stage you remember that there was this letter which I had signed, but I had not dated because I wanted to revisit it. But it's no longer there, and I don't know who took it, and I didn't intend that letter to leave my office as yet, because I still wanted to satisfy myself about certain things. That's why I wanted to revisit it. It's gone. You don't know who has taken it. And, well, you do ask your secretary, and she gives you an answer that suggests that she doesn't also know who took it. And then you don't follow up. I mean, when you received that draft or the response or the draft, I think you said that you realized that it was saying inquiries Mr. J. Rapella. Now, that was your DDG who was dealing with matters relating to Optimum, as I understand, and or Eskom. So I would have expected that he would have been the first person, or at least one of the people you would approach to say, I got a draft response which was left in my office for my signature. I read it, I signed it, but I didn't date it because I didn't want it to go yet. I still wanted to revisit it. It has disappeared. Do you know anything about it? Because you are in charge of Eskom issues or Optimum issues.
Yeah. I think, Chairperson, in hindsight, one could have done better. One could have been vigilant. But sometimes you never expect that people can use a government system for their own ulterior motives. But these things have happened. Perhaps they saw weaknesses somewhere in the system, and it looks like some people had their own ulterior motives. And when you look at the two letters, Chairperson, you can clearly see that there were people, working on these things without the department, especially myself, knowledge. So in hindsight, perhaps I should have revisited this and done it better than I did. And I accept that I could have done it better, Chairperson. I didn't do it as I should have done, as I think now I would do it.
Okay, Mr. Malik, I see that
Yes.
we are about 90 minutes past.
Yes.
Let's take the tea adjournment, and we'll resume at 25:02.
Thank you,
We
Chair.
adjourn. Yes, you may proceed, Mr. Malika.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, I'd like to go to the next part of the letter,
Yes.
TR13, and I'd like to do so quickly because I promised my colleagues who are waiting in the wings.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I actually forgot about
Yes.
that part. Okay.
They're
Yes.
eagerly waiting for your attention, Chair.
Yes. Okay. All right.
Dr. Ramocha, you are still at TR13, the letter that you signed. I'd like to deal with the last paragraph of that letter. Are you there?
Yes, Chairperson.
It reads as follows. Financial provision due to historical liabilities at OCH level is estimated at 1.7 billion. The amount still has to be confirmed through a process which will involve the parties concerned. We would also request Eskom to play an active role in providing support for the project to proceed. Can I stop there? Firstly, the letter of Mr. Koko says nothing about financial liabilities of OCH, correct?
Yes, Chairperson.
That letter did not even request Eskom to intervene at all. Sorry, it did not request DMR to intervene at all regarding questions around financial liabilities of OCH, correct?
Yes, Chairperson.
The letter of Mr. Koko did not even suggest that Eskom would have to play an active role in any project, correct?
Yes, Chairperson.
And yet this paragraph talks about a request to Eskom to play an active role in some project. Question is, did you understand what project this letter was referring to?
Okay. The project, I took it that, the people who have been involved in the discussions, they are basically discussing on how they could rescue Optimum or whatever at that point. And I thought that could be the project which they are referring to. But it was just a mist in my mind. I wasn't sure exactly what are they referring to.
Yes.
But then I just said, look, let's see. But obviously there were people who came together, discussed, constructed the letter. So I
Yes.
said, they probably have got other things which they are working on.
No, I understand. But you were here yesterday when Mr. Marsden testified,
Yes.
and you heard his evidence.
Yes.
He made it quite clear that at that point in time, when your response was formulated, OCM did not require any support at all because its parent companies had decided to take it out of business rescue, and they had decided to make sure that it will comply with its obligations under CSA. So in hindsight, having heard Mr. Marsden, it should be clear to you now that OCM did not require any assistance whatsoever.
No, Chairperson, I agree with you. I mean, things are now getting revealed.
Oh, yes.
And then it was a different environment. It's like there was a crisis. If you reread the letter of Mr. Koko, it just paints a crisis of crisis for the country, I don't know why would a person draft a letter like that, and now things are now clear that there's something not correct in the whole scheme of things. Things are not fine, Chairperson.
Well, as you heard from my questions before the break, I'm also concerned about the fact that after you became aware that this letter that you had signed on the basis of certain assumptions, and you didn't know who had brought it to your desk, and you had not asked anybody to draft a response for you, and it disappeared from your desk under mysterious circumstances. You didn't even, as I infer from your evidence, you didn't even phone Mr. Koko and say, Mr. Koko, you wrote me a letter, and there was a response that I had signed to go to you, but I didn't intend it to leave my desk yet, and it has left my desk. Have you by any chance got it? Please don't act on it, because I had not intended it to leave yet. I still wanted to revisit it or something like that. You didn't do anything like that, isn't it?
Yes, Chairperson, I didn't do that.
And that concerns me,
Okay.
you know, particularly in circumstances. If it was your own letter in the true sense, you had drafted it, you knew exactly what the whole thing was about, and it left, but you knew that there was nothing for you to continue to look at. That may have been fine, but you presumed that certain people had discussed certain things that were dealing with Optimum, Eskom, and the letter says certain things will be done, and it says them under your own hand, and you don't even know whether those things will be done, I assume, because you don't know who drafted it, and there is no assurance that what it says is correct.
Okay. If I may come in, Chair.
Yes.
I think, Chair, at that time, as I said, earlier on, is the communication channels
Yes.
in the department had changed.
Yes.
And, I don't want to repeat this. There was like a mist, in front of you.
Yeah.
So when things come, you just get discouraged. You don't know what is happening. You are trying to add the dots. In a normal environment, Chairperson, in a normal environment, every single person who would be in, who would be in the mineral regulation branch, okay, assigned to this task, would transparently relate it to everybody. So you will probably have your DDG who will work on something and say, DG, here is a problem, let's solve this. Here is a letter. But in the way things were operated, they were totally different.
But you see, my point is exactly that.
Yes.
That because on your own evidence, you have said that the situation was not normal.
Yeah.
Issues relating to Optimum had been centralized in the minister's office.
Yes.
You were marginalized. You were excluded from decisions that were being taken. And your own DDG, whereas before Minister Zwane's time, when he spoke to you about issues falling under him, he would talk to you and update you properly on your own evidence. You have told me he was now whispering to you about what was happening. All of these things I'm suggesting to you should have put you on the alert and to have been even more concerned about a letter that you had not authorized to be taken out of your office, having left without your knowledge in circumstances where you had not dated it. So I'm saying those strange and abnormal circumstances that you have told me about are the very circumstances that should have made you more worried. And if you were more worried, you ought to have taken steps to say, well, that letter, whoever took it, must be stopped, because it didn't leave my office with my authorization. And you know who it was addressed to, Mr. Koko. So whoever took it must have intended to send it to Mr. Koko. And there is no reason why you couldn't have phoned Mr. Koko and say, disregard such and such a letter if it comes to you because I didn't intend it to leave. You will see it doesn't have the date when I signed it, and that's because I was still going to revisit it. Maybe I will respond with another letter or something like that. So I just want to mention that and to give you a chance to say something. And I'm mentioning it simply because I'm quite concerned about it.
Chairperson, I think, as I said earlier, in hindsight, when I look at it, should have done better. I should have been more vigilant than I was then. But I never thought that there are ulterior motives which are associated with the letter. And it's said that now, with all these things coming to the light, you start to see that, people can use the system of government for their own benefits. And I think I should have done better.
Thank you. You may proceed, Mr. Malaka.
Chair, can I ask you to go to page 227 of Mr.
Of the bundle in front of me.
No, of Mr. Marsden's file. If you don't have it, let me read it out to you.
Yeah, just read them.
It is clause 12 of the sale agreement.
I've got it, but you can just read. Yeah.
Yes, and maybe for the benefit of Dr. Ramuncha. It provides the following. The investments held by Optimum Mine Rehabilitation Trusts and Fontaine Rehabilitation Trust shall on 31 January 2016 comprise cash or cash equivalents with an aggregate value of no less than 1.750 billion rand. Now, Dr. Ramuncha, when someone in the letter that you signed talks about the estimated liabilities of OCH with regard to the rehabilitation trust funds and pin down the estimate at 1.7 billion rand, which amount is more or less the one that is contemplated in the clause of the sale agreement I've just read out to you. It suggests that someone in DMR who was party to the formulation of this letter would have had information around the estimate of those liabilities. Do you accept that?
Yes, I accept so.
Yes.
It can only come from within the department.
Indeed. Were you aware when you were called upon to look at this letter and sign it, what were the estimate liabilities of OCH relating to the rehabilitation trust funds of both OCM and Fontaine?
At that time, I was not aware because I would not be involved in the details of each and every mine, what is the financial provision.
Yes.
So I wasn't aware. Those things, it means someone actively went and checked it. Because even if you go to a regional office now and say, there is mine X, regional manager, tell me what is the financial provision, you wouldn't know or she wouldn't know.
Yes.
She will have to go and look at the documents. So that means there was someone who actively went, look at those things and look at the values and say, let's put this in this letter.
Indeed. Without even responding to Mr. Koko's letter?
Yes.
Yes. Chair, I'm going to move to the next part of the letter, hopefully the last one.
Yes.
It begins at the end of TR 13. If I may read it out to you, Dr. Ramuncha. The last sentence there, Chair, says, in return for the new owners honoring the current contract up to 2018. Of course, Mr. Koko's letter does not talk about new owners, correct?
Yes.
And driving transformation, Mr. Koko's letter does not even talk about transformation, correct?
Yes.
We would like to propose that consideration be made for some prepayment to be made for up to 1 year of coal supply. Let me stop there. Mr. Koko's letter does not even talk about prepayment in order to accommodate whoever was running the mine at that point in time. Correct? When did you become aware for the first time that Eskom had arranged a prepayment to be made to Tegeta? And we now know that on record is about 659 million odd rand.
When it was in the news,
Before that, you did not know?
yes,
Okay.
no.
And then it proceeds as follows. Prepayment be made up to 1 year for coal supply, understanding the upfront capital injection to be made to ramp up production to meet coal supply requirements from these mines. We now know that, as a matter of fact, the prepayment which was extended by Eskom to Tegeta was not even for the capital or operational requirements of any mine.
Okay.
Correct?
Yes?
In fact, it was used to provide for the shortfall for the purchase of Optimum coal mine. Correct?
Okay.
So this representation in this letter is false. Of course, you did not know, but whoever wrote this letter at that point in time was misstating the facts. Do you agree that whoever formulated the letter at that point in time, without your knowledge, was simply misleading you as the DG?
Yes, I agree. And after listening to yesterday's statements which were made here, I now, with regards to the letter from Mr. Koko, I now see that, there were some ulterior motives associated with the two letters. It's quite clear from where I am now. I don't want to make conclusions, but that there were people who were working on the two letters. And unfortunately, it is, when I saw this statement, I said, well, I understood the letter to be saying that this is a proposal, okay? And I will also go back to my statement, Chairperson, of saying Eskom can't get a directive from a department, or another department. It can only get a directive from the Department of Public Enterprise. And the management of Eskom, if they want to say that this was a directive, I've got a problem with that. They don't understand how corporate governance works, okay? This, I just saw it as a proposal and say, look, there's a crisis. When is a crisis, which was painted by them, by Mr. Koko, when there's a crisis, you can look at other innovative ways of addressing a crisis. We have done it in the past in the department, when we did things unconventionally within the law to address the crisis. So I looked this letter, I assessed the risk. To me, there was nothing illegal on my part in the letter. There was nothing which I saw that is untoward. I just thought this can be a proposal which will help the country. We have gone through power cuts, load shedding in the past, and I just said, if this man is painting that there will be load shedding, there will be power cuts, perhaps this letter can assist. But I knew the corporate governance. If they had to implement anything there, they will have to go through the processes of Eskom. So I just left it as it is. And I'm surprised now that they didn't even contact their department on this issue. They only contacted Department of Mineral Resources. Very strange.
Chair, two concluding remarks.
Yeah, you may proceed.
Yeah, two concluding remarks, Dr. Ramuncha. The first is, we now know from your evidence, you don't know what happened to this letter.
Yeah.
Do you know whether or not this letter, yours and the preceding one of Mr. Koko, were ever used by Tegeta in order to accelerate fulfillment of the condition precedents in the share sale agreement it concluded with OCM, OCH, with the support of Glencore?
No, I'm not aware. As I said, I was not privy to these issues totally.
Are you aware whether or not this letter could have been presented to the Competition Commission with a view to urge it to accelerate the merger assessment and approval of the OCH transaction?
I'm not aware of any.
Are you aware whether or not this letter could have been presented to the Bank of Baroda in order to ensure that Tegeta would comply with its obligation to fulfill the condition precedents?
Chairperson, this is news to me.
I'm not saying that they've done it. I'm just asking you whether or not are you aware that these letters...
I'm not aware, Chairperson.
Yes. There must have been a purpose to this letter. And I'm not going to bore you with what I consider to be the purpose. When Eskom, through Mr. Koko, presents a situation of crisis, and your department respond to the situation in a manner that does not relate to Mr. Koko's request, the two are not talking to each other. In fact, I suggest to you that there's a twin deception. Eskom's letter deceives you, correct?
Yes.
And this letter that we have seen you have written deceives Eskom because it does not talk to its requirements, correct?
No, I agree, Chairperson. Yes.
What do you think is the reason for this scale and scope of deception?
Well, with what is transpiring now, you can see that it looks like to me that there were people who were trying to favor Tegeta to acquire this asset of Optimum. And this is just my perception, Chairperson. And they used the system of government to try to do that. Okay? And with the letter, why did they go to the Department of Minerals to do this? I don't know why they did that. Maybe it was an easier route for them to do that, or they were part of whatever they were planning. But it's quite clear that there's a linkage of some kind, and the inquiry will probably find out those linkages.
For my part, I agree with you. Chair, that's the end of our questions to Dr. Ramuncha.
Thank you. Dr. Ramuncha, this letter is not dated, but do you recall more or less around what date you would have signed it?
It's around...
The one to which you are responding was signed by Mr. Koko on the 6th of December 2015. So, and on the 10th of December, you were asked to resign, to put in your letter of resignation, but you only left at the end of January.
Yeah.
So are you able to say more or less around what date you think you must have signed it?
It was before I submitted my letter of resignation.
So
around the 7th, around there.
Around the 7th, just after the 6th.
Yeah, just after the minister, I think around minister, they had gone to Zurich, I think they came back on the 7th.
Yes.
So, or the 6th, around there.
Around the 7th.
Those dates.
Yes, yes. Okay. And in preparation for coming here, did you ask Mr. Rapella about whether he ever knew anything about this letter?
I tried now because when I was with the investigators, I asked them, I said, can I contact Mr. Rapella? Because I know at some point when that letter surfaced in Parliament,
yes,
I sent it to him, but we never went into its details. So, but when the investigators were discussing this issue, I asked them, I said, can I contact people to prepare for my responses? They then said, yes, it's fine. Then I tried to phone Mr. Rapella, he hasn't returned my calls. Yes.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Ramuncha, for coming to give your evidence. I'm going to excuse you for now. Should a need arise for you to come back, we'll ask you to come back.
Okay.
Thank you. You are excused.
Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you.
Chair, may we ask for a short adjournment for our colleagues who are going to deal with Minister Nene's evidence to set up and prepare themselves.
Will 5 minutes be enough? Shall we say 5 minutes?
Shall I suggest 10 minutes? So that you should not move in and out. I'm doing it for your convenience because they may not be ready. We have to go and...
Okay, let's say we will resume at 12:10.
Thank you, Chair.
We adjourn. Yes.
That was an application that was filed on behalf of Mr. Nene for a postponement due to ill health. And just to place on record that application was actually heard on the 15th of November.
Yes, that was my recollection.
Yeah.
So what is it doing here?
It so happened in the compilation of the file, these two have always been together, and I think the error occurred in duplicating both of them for purposes of K2. It really should
Okay.
not be in the file, Chair.
Okay, all right.
So that one has been granted and on the 15th of November, so it's disposed of.
Yeah.
So what I stand to address you on primarily, Chair, is the application brought by the legal team for non-compliance with the provisions of Rule 3.3, and that would be under tab 1.
Yes.
Now, just to briefly give you a background, Mr. Nene testified on the 3rd of October, 2018.
Yes.
His statement having been received on the 1st of October, and the annexures thereto, the complete annexures on the 2nd of October. This made it impossible for the legal team to comply with the 14-day 3.3 notice. The notices were, however, issued immediately upon receipt of the complete file, and they appear as annexes B1 to B4 in your file. The reasons for the delay are well articulated in paragraph 14.8, and Chair, we submit that they are reasonable under the circumstances.
I don't know what they are.
At paragraph 14.8 at page 17.
Let's deal with this properly. Is this in respect of the supplementary
No, it's in
statement or
respect of the original statement.
Okay, so just take me back. What had happened then?
Okay. Let's start with the date on which Mr. Nene appeared before you, Chair. That was the 3rd of October.
Yes.
As if the Chair would have regard to page 17 of the bundle, at paragraph 14.8, the legal team states that the statement was only received on the 1st of October, and the complete annexures on the 2nd of October, when Mr. Nene was due to testify the following day on the 3rd. That meant that the legal team could not comply with the requirements of the 14-day notice period in terms of 3.3. From paragraph 14.8.1, also on page 17, we set out the reasons why the statement was late in the first place.
Yes, and what were those reasons?
The reasons were a few reasons. It was, apologies, Minister Nene's busy work schedule at the time. He was doing a whole lot of traveling. There was the issues he had to deal with, the volume was increasing, and he had to apply his mind thereto. The availability of his legal representatives to complete the statement, including the voluminous issues that were raised subsequent to the first draft. And then
the statement was supposed to have arrived when?
The statement was supposed to
so
have...
So in other words, how long was the delay?
If the Chair has regard to paragraph 14.5, that's where we set the timelines.
Yes, just tell me what it says.
It says that on 29th August 2018, it was contemplated that Mr. Nene would give evidence on the 10th of September. The date was later changed to the 14th of September in light of Mr. Nene's unavailability, and on 7th September, a new date was arranged for the 3rd of October. So if one then has regard to the 3rd of October, which is the new scheduled date, the statement should have been received by us as a bare minimum 14 days prior to that date. That would have been mid-September, around the 15th of September.
Yes. It ended up arriving on the 2nd of October.
It arrived in two parts. The statement itself arrived on the 1st of October, and the complete set of annexures to the statement arrived on the 2nd of October.
Okay, so the delay was about 2 weeks.
The delay was about 2 weeks, Chair.
Yes, for the reasons that you have given.
Indeed, Chair.
Okay.
Now, the persons implicated by Mr. Nene's statement, former President Zuma, Mr. Mahlobo, Ms. Jumat Peterson, and Ms. Nkwana Mashabane.
Yes.
If you permit me, Chair, I'm going to hand up a few documents which were received after the compilation of the application, which are the responses from the various implicated persons.
Yeah, no, I might not need you to hand them up.
Then I may just
I just
quickly-
need you to tell me whether you sent out the notices, when you sent them out, whether there's been reaction to them, and when that was.
Let me start with former President Zuma. There has been, the notice was delivered in terms of B1
Yes.
of the file, and there
Yes.
has been no response.
Yes.
Ms. Ngwana Mashabane responded on the 19th of October to indicate that she had received the notice, perused the notice together with the attachments, and in particular paragraphs 58 and 106, and she
Yes.
drew a conclusion that she is not implicated
Yes.
by the allegations made by Mr. Nene.
Yes.
So that was the position she took, and no further correspondence has been entered into.
Yes.
The second one, Chair, would be Mr. Mahlobo. Mr. Mahlobo's view was to confirm that he did receive the notice of the 12th, and he too draws the conclusion that he is not implicated by the evidence of Mr. Nene.
Yes.
He therefore elects not to give evidence, to call any witness, or to cross-examine Minister Nene.
Okay.
He, however, indicated that he has no objection to the grant of the condonation application that we sought to bring.
Yes.
Lastly, communication was received from Ms. Jumat Peterson's attorneys. It was a fairly long letter, basically requesting a range of documents, much along the lines of better discovery, to enable her to deal with the Rule 3.3. She confirmed, however, in that letter that she had received the notice, together with Mr. Nene's statement and the annexures thereto, requested this list of documents which we considered irrelevant for purposes of Rule 3.4, and should she be interested to receive those further documents, she is at liberty to get in touch with Mr. Nene's attorneys to receive them directly. In light of that, of that long list, she indicated that the 14-day period hasn't started to run against her. We indicated that everything that the Commission received from Mr. Nene, on the basis of which we issued a 3.3, has been made available to her, and then under the circumstances we are of the view that she is able to make a determination whether to invoke her rights in terms of the rules. And we haven't received a response thereto. In her original response, she had, however, indicated her willingness to appear before you and to answer any questions that the Chair may have. And that is the status of then the implicated persons, Chair.
Okay. No, that's fine. The required condonation is granted.
I'm indebted to you, to the Chair.
Yes, Mr. Pretorius.
Thank you, Chair.
I think,
it's perhaps appropriate, given the lapse of time, to swear the witness in.
Just administer the oath. Yeah, thank you.
Please state your full names for the record.
Nhlanhla Mosanene.
Do you have any objections to taking the prescribed oath?
No.
Do you consider the oath to be binding on your conscience?
Yes.
Do you swear that the evidence you give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? If so, please raise your right hand and say, "So help me God."
So help me God.
Thank you.
I understood, Mr. Nene, towards the end of last year that you had injured your foot. I hope it has fully recovered.
Chair, it is 97.3% recovered.
Yes.
And I call this the benefits of old age. I turned 60 a few months ago.
Oh.
So it takes slightly longer for a person of my age to
recover.
heal.
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Pretorius.
Thank you. Mr. Nene, in the file K2 before you,
after the second divider, you will see a document entitled Supplementary Affidavit of Nhlanhla Musaneni signed. Do you see that? It's after the third divider. That part of the bundle has been separately paginated, and if you would go to page 15, please. Whose signature is that?
It
on
is my,
page 15?
it is my signature, Commissioner.
And the statement from pages 1 to 15, is that your statement?
It is indeed my statement.
Are you aware of the contents of that statement?
I am fully aware of the
Are they
contents.
true and correct?
Absolutely.
Before dealing with the contents of your statement, it's perhaps necessary to explain, Mr. Nene, why you are here today. You gave evidence before this commission on the 3rd of October 2019. You obviously recall that. However,
is correct.
in the 1 or 2 days before you testified, several things took place. Firstly, an article appeared in electronic media and the press, making certain what appeared to be serious allegations against you. In the bundle before you, they appear, and I'll refer to them in detail in due course from page 50 and following. All these articles to which I'm now going to refer were provided to your legal representatives in order to allow you an opportunity to consider them. Secondly, on the 2nd and 3rd of October, the Economic Freedom Front, the EFF, released public statements, also making quite serious allegations against you. These appear at page 59 and 61, and we'll refer to them in a moment. And then various other allegations appeared in social media. For example, the allegation at page 69. Now, on the 3rd of October, and we'll come to them in a moment, Mr. Nene, on the 3rd of October, there were discussions between the Commission's legal team and your legal representatives, the result of which was that you were informed by the legal team that it would be unfair to confront you with these allegations at that stage when you'd not had a chance to consider them and to consider your response. And in response to that information, you undertook to come back to give evidence before this commission for two main reasons. One, so that these allegations could be put to you, you having had a chance with your legal representatives to consider their detail. And secondly, to allow you to put your own response to what is contained in these allegations. And that is the purpose of your evidence today. If I can take you then to page 50 so that we may understand these allegations. On page 50, and it appears that this is an article that appeared in Business Live, and it was derived from internet sources. Its source is less important for the moment, at least, than what is said in the article. The first paragraph reads, "Towards the end of last May, a former colleague of mine, John Gludlu, who writes a column for Business Day, wrote something that made my hair stand on end," says the author of this article. Julius Malema is at it again. He wrote, "This time he has set his sights on Finance Minister Nhlanhla Nene, holder of probably the most important cabinet portfolio after the President. During the debate on the Presidency's budget vote, Malema accused Nene, who was reappointed to his old job in February, of impropriety, suggesting that the EFF is in possession of a dossier of meetings he had with dodgy business people during his tenure as deputy to then Finance Minister Pravin Gordhan. That's the first allegation that's quoted in this article. You deal with it in your statement.
I don't.
The second allegation that arises in this particular article is a quote from a former